It was the kind of golden California afternoon that looks perfect from a distance. Soft light over green lawns. The hum of music and laughter blending with the clink of glasses. But standing behind the kitchen counter, I could feel the loneliness beneath all that sunshine. Lauren's house was full of her friends that day. Lawyers from her firm, her husband Eric's golf buddies, and the women from her yoga circle, all with polished nails and polite smiles. I stayed where I always did, in the background. My place was the kitchen, not the crowd. I pulled a tray of shortbread cookies from the oven. The same recipe my mother once taught me when I was barely old enough to hold a spoon. The scent filled the room. Butter, sugar, a hint of lemon. Familiar and comforting. I arranged them neatly and carried the tray outside, trying to ignore the thrum of voices that quieted as I stepped onto the patio. "Cookies, everyone," I said softly. Heads turned. A few guests took one, smiling out of politeness. Then came the laugh. Lauren's laugh. The one she used when she wanted the room's attention. "Oh, she just kind of stays here," she said lightly, waving toward me like I was part of the furniture. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just awkward, uncertain, but it hurt all the same. My hands trembled as I held the tray, and for a second I thought I might drop it. Eric met my eyes briefly, gave a small, tight smile, then looked away. No one spoke up. I turned back into the house, placed the cookies on the counter, and started cleaning up dishes no one thanked me for. That's what I did best, stay useful, stay quiet. By the time the party ended and Lauren's heels clicked upstairs, I was still in the kitchen wiping down the countertops until the granite gleamed like glass. Eric passed behind me, muttering, "Thanks, Evelyn," before disappearing without a glance. Not Mom, not mother-in-law, just Evelyn, like a tenant who overstayed her welcome. 3 mornings later, I was in the same kitchen making tea. I reached for a mug and knocked a glass off the rack. It shattered on the floor with a sharp, ringing sound that made my heart jump. I bent down quickly, whispering to myself, "Damn it," and started picking up the shards. That's when I heard her voice behind me. "What did you do now?" Lauren stood in the doorway, her expression tight. "Phone in hand, dropped a glass," I said. But she raised her hand to silence me. "You should know your place," she snapped. "Don't think that just because you've lived here, you have a right to stay here." I froze, the glass cutting lightly into my palm. "Lauren." Her voice rose, sharp and cold. "You think being old makes you entitled? You think cleaning up crumbs earns you a free pass?" "I didn't mean—" "I swear to God, if you don't get out of this house, I'll call the cops." Her words hit harder than I expected. She had shouted before, but this was different. This was a line she was willing to cross. I looked up at her, my voice small but steady. "I'm your mother?" She laughed once, "Short and cruel you were." She pulled her phone from her pocket, pressed a few buttons and said, "Hello, yes. I need to report a trespasser." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I walked past her through the back door, into the garden I had planted with my own hands. My rosemary, my daisies, my earth. The sun was too bright, the air too still. And in that moment, I understood Lauren didn't see me as her mother anymore. I was a burden, a piece of old furniture she wanted out of sight. But what she didn't know was that the soil beneath her, designer sandals the house she claimed, still belonged to me. And for the first time in years, I felt something fierce awaken inside me. This wasn't my home anymore, but it was still my house. It was the spring of 1983 when Paul and I first walked through the doorway of the house that would one day hold our whole story. The paint was peeling, the stairs groaned, and the kitchen looked like it hadn't been touched since Eisenhower was president. But to us, it was perfect, the kind of imperfection you could grow roots in. Paul ran his fingers along the banister, grinning like a man who could already see tomorrow. "It's got good bones," he said. Just like us. We didn't have much back then, a second-hand pickup. 2 savings bonds and a shared dream. Our honeymoon had been a borrowed cabin by a lake, canned chili cooked over a rusted camping stove, and laughter echoing through the pines. But love, I learned, makes small things grand. We painted the walls ourselves that summer. Paul balanced on a ladder in faded jeans, humming off-key, while I trimmed the corners with careful strokes. Lauren was just 6 then, all knees and freckles, twirling barefoot across the drop cloth with a streak of mint green paint on her cheek. "Careful, sweetheart," Paul laughed, "steadying the ladder, or your mama's gonna paint you instead of the walls." She giggled, her laughter brighter than the sunlight pouring through the dusty windows. We filled that house with simple things: dinner on the porch when the breeze was soft, birthday candles that never stayed lit, nights when the power went out and we sang by candlelight. We didn't own much, but what we had mattered. Every chair, every curtain, every photograph was a piece of us. That home saw us through everything: the layoffs, the recoveries, the scraped knees, the slow Sundays. The walls learned our laughter, our whispers, our prayers. And when the years caught up to us, those same walls heard our silence too. When Paul got sick in 2006, the house changed with him. I moved his bed downstairs when the stairs became too cruel. The living room became a ward of love, the beeping of machines mixing with the sound of his favorite country songs on low volume. He passed one soft morning with sunlight spilling across his pillow, his hand still warm in mine. The house held its breath that day, as if even the air understood what it had lost. After the funeral, I stayed. For 5 long years, I stayed. Every creak in the floorboard carried his voice. Sometimes I'd swear I could hear him humming down the hall. I tended the garden like it was holy ground, because in a way, it was. It was the place where our story began and ended. But grief, like ivy, grows in the quiet. It crept into corners, wrapped around the memories, and squeezed the air out of the rooms. Loneliness became another resident of that house. Then one Sunday, Lauren came over, confident, successful, and impatient in the way only youth can be. "Mom," she said, "you shouldn't be alone anymore. Move in with us. We've got space, and it'll be good for both of us." I hesitated. I looked around that house, at the faded curtains I'd sewn myself, the garden that still smelled like Paul's aftershave, and something inside me whispered, "Don't go." But loneliness makes fools out of even the strong. I told myself it was time for a new beginning, a shared life with my daughter again. So I packed away 40 years of memories into boxes labeled "Keepin' Someday," locked the front door, and handed the keys to a property manager to rent it out. I didn't sell it. I couldn't. The deed stayed in my name, tucked inside a drawer, hidden behind old letters and family photographs, a quiet secret between Paul and me. Because some promises are too sacred to let go. When I moved into Lauren's house, I thought I was gaining company. Instead, I slowly started to lose pieces of myself. At first, living with Lauren and Eric felt like a relief. The house was big. The room smelled of lemon and linen. And for the first time in years, there were voices echoing down the hallway again. I told myself I could get used to it, the rhythm of a shared home, the comfort of not eating dinner alone. Lauren brought me tea every evening for the first month. Eric helped carry boxes to the attic. It was nice for a little while, but then slowly the air began to change. It started with small things. My favorite mug disappeared from the cabinet. The framed photo of Paul and me was moved from the hallway to my bedroom to keep the space modern. My knitting basket, the one I kept near the sofa, vanished one afternoon and never came back. Lauren began to reorganize my presence the way some people rearrange furniture, politely but permanently. Then came the rules. "Mom, could you avoid using garlic? The smell lingers. Try not to watch TV past 10. Eric needs to rest for work. Let's keep your plants outside." It clashes with the aesthetic. I nodded. Always nodded. That's what mothers do. We bend so our children won't break. But soon the bending turned into shrinking. I found myself retreating to my room earlier each night. The house was theirs. The dinner table, the living room, even the silence between their conversations. Mine was a single small room with a window facing the fence. I still tried to be helpful. I folded their laundry, packed Eric's lunches when he left early, watered Lauren's roses when she forgot. I told myself it was love. But love, I was learning, should never feel like servitude. One night, I came downstairs quietly to warm a glass of milk. The house was dark except for the soft glow from the living room. I paused when I heard my name. "She's just always there," Lauren whispered, her voice tired but sharp. Eric mumbled something too quiet to hear. "She's exhausting," Lauren continued. Like emotional clutter. Those 2 words, emotional clutter, cut deeper than any argument could. I stood there in the dark, the cool tile beneath my feet, holding the empty glass that suddenly felt too heavy. I wanted to cry, to walk into that room and remind her who I was. The mother who once stayed up nights sewing her costumes. The woman who fed her soup through fevers. Who sold jewelry to pay her tuition. But I said nothing. I turned away, climbed the stairs slowly, and sat on the edge of my bed until dawn. Silence, I learned, can be stronger than shouting. It keeps count. It remembers everything. The next morning, I watered the plants as usual. Lauren walked past me, coffee in hand, chatting on her phone. She didn't even glance at me. That was when I began to understand I wasn't living with my daughter anymore. I was living around her. And yet, she still had no idea that the roof over her head, the floors she walked across, the very walls she decorated, all of it was mine. The deed was still tucked safely in my drawer, next to the last letter Paul ever wrote me. I hadn't told anyone, not even Lauren, because I knew one day that paper might be the only voice I had left. It was a Thursday morning in late October when the first crack appeared, not in the walls, but in the truth. I was folding laundry when I overheard Eric talking on the phone in the kitchen. His voice was low, confident, the way people sound when they think they're building something. "Yeah, the paperwork's nearly done," he said. "Once it's transferred, we'll finally be free of that old property. I told Lauren her mom won't even notice. She trusts her too much." My heart stopped mid-beat. Old property? Transferred? I stood frozen behind the doorway, clutching one of Eric's shirts in my hand. My own breath sounded too loud. When the call ended, I waited a long moment before stepping in. "Eric," I said softly, "what property were you talking about?" He turned, startled. "Oh, just the investment thing." "You wouldn't understand, Evelyn. It's complicated." Complicated. That word again. The kind people use when they want to shut you out gently. That night, I went to my room and unlocked the small drawer beside my bed. The deed to my house was still there, folded neatly inside a brown envelope. My fingers trembled as I ran them across my own signature. Evelyn Grace Thompson. The house Paul and I had built from nothing, still legally mine. But for how long? The next morning I confronted Lauren. She was sitting at the kitchen island, typing on her laptop, the sunlight reflecting off her polished wedding ring. "Lauren," I began, "I need to ask you something. What's going on with my house?" She froze just for a moment, then gave a little sigh, as if I'd interrupted something important. "Oh, Mom," she said lightly. "Don't worry about that, Eric, and I just thought it would be easier to transfer it under our names for tax purposes. You don't need to stress about paperwork at your age." At my age, the words sliced through me like glass. "Without telling me?" I asked quietly. She looked up, her expression tightening. "You weren't using it anymore. It's just sitting there, collecting dust. We're planning to renovate and maybe sell it. You could stay here permanently. Isn't that better?" "Better." I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. All those years I'd convinced myself she just wanted to help, that her control came from care, not convenience. But standing there, watching her sip coffee like it was all a simple decision, I saw it clearly. She didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as an obstacle. "That house," I said slowly, "was built with your father's hands. With my savings. It's the only place left where he still feels alive. And you want to sell it? For convenience?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mom, please don't make this dramatic. You should be grateful we're even keeping you here. Most people your age end up in care homes." Something in me snapped. Not in rage, but in clarity. I realized then that kindness without respect is just control in a prettier dress. I said nothing more, just nodded quietly as if defeated. But inside, something fierce began to stir. Something Paul would have recognized in me from years ago, when I fought to keep our first home from being repossessed. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat by the window and made a plan. I found the old leather binder Paul used for finances. Inside, tucked away with his letters, was the name of the lawyer who had helped us years ago, Mr. Whitman. I hadn't seen him in decades, but maybe, just maybe, he'd remember. By morning, my decision was made. I was leaving, not quietly this time. I left before sunrise. The house was still asleep, wrapped in its own comfort and lies. I packed only what mattered: Paul's letters, the deed, a photograph of Lauren as a child holding a jar of fireflies. I didn't bother leaving a note. By the time the first light spilled over the driveway, I was gone. The cab driver didn't ask questions when I gave him the address, my address, the one etched on the deed I carried close to my chest. When we pulled up, I felt my throat tighten. The shutters were different, the paint was newer, but the air still smelled like home. The tenants had moved out weeks earlier, the property manager had said. It stood empty now, hollow but waiting. My hand shook as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a quiet click, not resistance, not rejection. Almost like it remembered me, I stepped inside. Dust floated in the sunlight, swirling like old ghosts. Every sound, every scent, Every shadow whispered of Paul. I pressed my palm against the wall. "I'm home," I whispered. For the first time in years, the silence felt gentle. I spent the next few hours airing out the rooms, opening the curtains, setting Paul's photo back on the mantel where it belonged. And when I was done, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd once shared burnt pancakes and laughter, and called Mr. Whitman. He remembered me, and when I told him everything, from the whispers to the forged transfer papers, his voice sharpened with quiet outrage. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson," he said. "The deed is still yours. No signature but yours can change that. I'll take care of the rest." By evening, everything was in motion. The legal safeguards, the account transfers, the quiet undoing of their plans. I turned off my phone for the night. When I switched it on again the next morning, there were 17 missed calls from Lauren. The last message was short. "Mom, what did you do?" "The bank called. Why would you freeze the funds?" "We need to talk." I didn't reply. Some conversations deserve silence as their answer. 2 days later, Lauren came to the old house. She stood on the porch, the same porch Paul built with his hands, her expression a storm of shock and guilt. "Mom, please," she said. "You can't just take this place back. We need it." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "This was never yours to take," I said quietly. "You wanted my home, my name, my peace. But you forgot something. I built this life before you even knew how to walk." Her eyes filled with tears, but I could see the resentment buried beneath them. She'd come for a fight, not forgiveness. I didn't give her either. I just handed her a small envelope, a copy of the deed with my signature clear and untouchable. "You'll be fine, Lauren," I said softly. "You always are, but this is where I belong." She turned and walked away without another word. The sound of her heels faded down the steps, swallowed by the wind. When the door closed, I exhaled, a long, trembling breath that felt like decades of sorrow leaving my chest. That night, I lit a single candle on the table and ate dinner alone. Not in loneliness this time, but in peace. The locks had remembered me, the walls had forgiven me, and somewhere I think Paul was smiling.